Chair, it's an interesting speech given by Leanne Dalziel. She's done some name dropping, book dropping. I'm going to do a bit of name dropping. I've met Senior Lord Bingham of Cornhill twice, at Oxford once, and prior to that in his chambers, and a finer judge I think it would be very difficult to meet. He was, and I'm sure still is, the kind of judge, as I say, the best of the best, in that for him it was all about listening rather than, which was good for me because that meant a lot of talking. But I want to say that I've seen it, I haven't read it, but I'm about to come to that. But he, probably a lot like another great jurist, Lord Cook of not so far from here, Thorndon, our greatest jurist, had a very, if you like, thick conception of the rule of law, and that attributed to the rule of law, probably I'm intuiting as Leanne Dalziel would, substantive concepts of what law should be about. You know, it should include rights to a certain kind of trial and the like. I would say, actually, and I will sort of link this into the bill, you'll be glad to know, Mr. Chair, I'd actually make the point that there's another very distinguished school on the rule of law, including Joseph Raz, a very well-known jurist from Oxford, that actually what the rule of law isn't so much those substance, but as a process, and very much, I mean, we can put it in one phrase, the rule according to laws, not men. And actually this bill, which presumably will become law, in my view, very much complies with the rule of law, because actually we will all know in this House through a set of prescriptions, clause 5, 6, 9, exactly what a substantive hearing is, and what the criteria by which judges are to judge whether AVL is used for an accused or not. So as I say, I come back to it, it would be rule by law, not by men, and it would meet, I think, most definitions of the rule of law, if not that thicker conception that the likes of Lord Bingham and Lord Cook would have, where they bring in principles, I accept that, principles, but principles that are contestable and that not all can necessarily always sign up to. Because as I say, with law, where it is multifaceted, where it is complex, there are often areas where exceptions are needed, where thick black rules can't be subscribed to. I want to also just pick up on something I think it was Keith Locke raised, and it's a misconception I think that's run throughout this debate from a number of the speakers, and that's this issue of body language. I know Kennedy Graham was doing so in jest, but he was referring to the Minister and the Chair and his various mannerisms. Now, of course, in jury trials in this country, I would venture, I haven't been around quite this long, but for decades, there has been a standard direction in the judge's bench book, which they guard jealously, but which makes it quite clear that jurors should in fact take into account body language. You might find that goes something like this, not you, Mr. Chair, but this is what the direction says, that, you know, by examining the witness and paying close attention to his or her body language and their eyes and so on, that you might get a good steer for what they're about. Actually, the most recent research on this point, and the best research, I think, makes it quite clear that body manners and mannerisms and language are inherently unreliable. And I think I said at the first reading of this case, of this bill, that in fact, you know, the twitchy witness might well be the most honest witness, and the witness who is, shall we say, stone cold sober, looking straight ahead, perhaps often the professional witness, oftentimes police witnesses, Mr Chair,
I called Simon Bridges.
may nevertheless be ones who are shielding things. And so, in fact, in that regard, our bench book and the way we do things in New Zealand may, in fact, need to be updated to take into account the science on body language. And I suppose, really, if you follow that through, the point that I make in relation to AVL is that we're not losing, I accept we are losing something with AVL when it's used, and that will be taken into account, I think, under the legislation that we are passing in this House, but we're not losing quite as much as people might think by losing the body language. That body language can be notoriously difficult to interpret and can lead people down the, to excuse the phrase, garden path. I end with this, Mr Chair. We've been talking a lot about wins, losses. Hone Harawira has won most of his cases where he's been the defendant person. Leanne Dalziel has lost her one defended case as counsel. Well, I don't get often to do this, so when I do, I could take the most of it. Over 100 jury trials in the district and high courts in this country, and I won just over half of them. So there you have it, Mr Chair.
I call Chris